we'll, if anybody else comes on, we'll let them in, but it looks like we're after 1 o'clock. I haven't heard the ding for a while about people joining. So thanks everybody for attending this Flex Fund debrief meeting that we've set up. We've sent the invitation out to all of the stakeholders and partners for our Flex Fund program, and we want to just kind of recap what happened, where we're at, and kind of where we're going. So I'm Brandon Bisey. I'm in the local government division now. I started in this position the beginning of the year, so I'm still trying to get up and get my feet under me a little bit. I've met a number of the people that I see on the list, but obviously not everyone. So hope to get out and meet people and shake hands in the coming months and over the summer and stuff like that. So again, thanks. I'm glad you all could attend. We're going to try to explain what the Flex Fund, the program, what it is, and then the process that we use to select the projects going forward. Everyone is muted right now. We're on this meeting format. Everybody's muted and the chat is closed. There's no mics, there's no cameras. When we get closer to the end here on the agenda, you'll see the Q&A period. We'll open up the camera, or we'll open up the chat option at that point, and then we hope that you guys can type your comments in, and then we'll also use the raise hand feature and see if we can figure that out and unmute people on our end, and then you'll unmute your own mic and ask a question. So and then also I wanted to mention that this is being recorded, and the recording will be made available sometime after the webinar as soon as we can get that posted. We'll put that out on our Flex Fund website from the DOT webpage. So looking at the agenda that Tracy's got up on the screen for us now, you can see the high points of what we want to talk about here for the next, I don't know, 20 minutes or so. And then we do have 90 minutes for the webinar. So hopefully we get a lot of Q&A at the end. I'll try to answer any specific questions you have, but we wanted to cover some background information before we get into that. So the 68th Legislative Assembly provided these funds to be used on the transportation system. So we'll get into quick purpose and background, and then we'll roll over to the project selection, the different types of Flex Funds programs that we have with the partner allocations and the set aside. We'll talk briefly about the criteria that was used to select projects, and then the different committees and people who made the decisions on which projects to move forward. And then we'll roll over. We've been getting a bunch of questions. This is a brand new program for everyone, including us at the DOT. We got this up and off the ground in short order. So we have been getting a lot of questions from the LPAs, the local public agencies out there. We'll try to cover some of those, the frequently asked questions, the ones that we've gotten over and over again. And then again, like I said, at the end, we'll open up the Q&A. We'll have an open chat and see if we can figure the microphones out. But again, input from you guys is what we're looking for. We want to make the program better. And the idea is that this program would roll around every legislative session. We'll have more funding for it. So as we move forward, we want to learn where we can make these improvements and make the program better for everybody involved. So the next slide then, Tracy. The presenters, like I said, I'm Brandon, the Assistant Division Director in the Local Government Division here at the DOT. Kent is our section lead on the rural side, and then Ben and Tracy manage a lot of the Flex program that we're doing here. And they'll all do their introductions when they speak here before we get going. I do want to emphasize for the first time, and it won't be the last time, that Ben and Tracy are here to help you guys. Please take advantage of all their availability, their services. Reach out to them with general questions, suggestions, any specific questions you have on the program or your specific projects. Ben and Tracy are here to help, and they do a good job of helping out when they get those questions and those comments. So with that, I guess I'm going to turn it over to Kent. He's going to get this thing going, and we'll go through all this stuff and try to wrap it up with some Q&A at the end. So thanks, Kent.
Yeah, thanks, Brandon. Like Brandon said, my name is Ken Lieben. Probably met most of the people in the meeting. Just was going to talk briefly about kind of where the Flexible Transportation Fund came from and, you know, kind of how we got here and how we handled that once it was turned over from the legislature to the DOT. So we as a department have been, I guess, proposing to the legislature for a while that it would be very good to have a source of state funds, a recurring source of state funds for the DOT and for our local partners, so that we could do a lot of projects that we either aren't able to fund with federal funds or are difficult to fund, or just, you know, because the additional funds are necessary. So this past session, the legislature did that. It had happened through a bunch of one-time fundings prior to that. This time they did create the Flexible Transportation Fund. Yeah, it's authorized, it's in Century Code. They obviously have to fund it every session, but this past session, they did provide the bill and then the funding, so which is estimated to be about $220 million for us, which is fantastic. And the goal of that money is to obviously improve the infrastructure across the state. One of the things they wanted to emphasize was that we should use this money to leverage other sources of funding, so matching grant funds, matching other federal funds, other sources of funding, that way to stretch all the dollars as far as we can. So the money for it comes from, there was $51 million that was transferred over from the SIF, the Statewide Investment and Improvement Fund. And then the remaining money is we get half of the motor vehicle excise tax that's collected. That's estimated to be about $220 million for the biennium. So the money from the SIF came over at the start of the biennium, and then each month we get the half of the excise tax comes in to us. The legislature gave some pretty loose guidance on what it could be used for. Basically, any sort of road and bridge construction. They did set aside 25% of that has to be spent on non-oil producing county and township road and bridge projects. So that led us into the set aside program. And then the other two parts of that is the partner allocation and what's the state needs, what's going to be spent on state highways or by the Department of Transportation. So the set aside is in law how much of the total fund has to be given to, or has to be spent on non-oil producing county and township projects. The remaining amount of money, how that's divvied up was determined, left to the discretion of our director, Ron Hinkie. So, yeah, I guess that's all I got for now. Like Brandon said, I do want to emphasize, yeah, we, you know, we're looking for input on, you know, any feedback we can get on how we can make the application process easier, how we can, you know, do the contracting, what type of projects people think this would be best fit for this program, different sorts of things like that. So, I mean, you know, we think it's a good program. We're excited. We are happy and want to make it as successful as possible. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Tracy.
I am Tracy. Was hired as part of the Flex Fund to help with applications and facilitating the program and everything. Just a brief recap of what we received for applications in this first round. We had 266 applications between the set aside and the partner allocation. You can see from that graph on the left that the majority of those applications were from townships and counties. But then when you look at the dollars requested, it's much more the city and county side. There was $432.8 million in requested funds. We only had 42.9 million for the set aside and 41 million for the partner allocation. So that meant a lot of really great projects that could not receive funding this round, but it does just reiterate to the legislature how needed that this program is, and that they should continue that in the future. A little bit about the project selection process, whether it was the set aside or the partner allocation, it went through the same phases. We did preliminary scoring, which that started, each project was scored in these different categories. So local funding came from how much is the local agency contributing to the project. Then economic development, like how does this project improve economic development? Does it make it so it's more possible? Does the project improve safety at all on this roadway? How does it affect complete streets, which means are you accommodating all of the road users that need to use that and not necessarily just vehicles? Complete or does it improve multimodal infrastructure, which again kind of goes back to the complete streets? Are you accommodating all the users? Are you improving the infrastructure for other modes of transportation? Are you removing a roadway restriction? And are you doing anything innovative? Besides the local funding portion of this project, all these other questions were essentially the essay questions at the end of the application. And this was really the area for applicants to explain the story of why their project was important and should be funded. Then the next step of the project was, or of the selection process, was to look at the different priorities that were laid out not only in the legislation, but also in the guidance documents for the fund. So we went through and we just summarized, is the project shovel ready? Do they have letters of support? Is it a local corridor, meaning it connects to a state highway, a county major collector, or an economic generator? What is the project value range? Meaning, is it a $50,000 project or is it a $50 million project? Is it, and then we looked at what percent of the project is requested. Are you requesting 100% of the project be funded by the Flex Fund, or is 10% of it being funded by the Flex Fund? And are there other funding sources? So those last two kind of go back to what Kent was talking about, the legislature wanting to stretch these dollars. We didn't assign any values to these priorities because that came in with the ranking portion of the selection process. And this is where the partner allocation and the set aside differed. With the set aside, it was a committee that ultimately decided what each of those priorities should be worth and how that should affect the score, that preliminary scoring that was done. So we had members from the North Dakota Indian Affairs Commission, North Dakota Association of Counties, North Dakota League of Cities, North Dakota Department of Commerce, North Dakota Township Officers Association, and the Greater North Dakota Chamber of Commerce. So a huge array of members of the committee, and that was just to make sure we're looking at diverse reasons for the project. And they each got to decide how each of those priorities should affect the final ranking of the projects. With the partner allocation, it was the DOT director that changed those rankings based on the priorities. And then from there, those rankings were sent to the DOT director for final approval, whether it was the set aside or the partner allocation.
Hello, everyone. I'm Ben. I also started last fall, same time as Tracy, on the Flex Fund. I'll kind of be going over the next steps for the projects that were awarded Flex Fund dollars. Very soon, you'll be receiving an email requesting information about the project timeline. We need to know when the preliminary engineering phase will begin and how long that will take, and the same with the construction phase. We just kind of need to keep track of when these funds are going to be dispersed from the Flex Fund program. And so once we get that information from you for your project, we will send out the agreement for signature from various county officials and then for the DOT signatories as well. That's still being finalized, so those will be sent out hopefully very soon as well. And then in a separate communication, you'll receive a template for a request for reimbursement. It's just gonna be a Word document. You fill in with your project information, and then however often you want to submit these requests for reimbursement, whether that's monthly, every couple of weeks, you fill it out, you send it to the Flex Fund email, flexfund@nd.gov, along with any invoices or pertinent information that you want to include, and then we will approve it and gets sent to finance, and then the money will be sent back to the county or city, depending on the project. And then this is a brand new program, so we've been kind of figuring it out as we go, like Ken and Brandon said. So we are always looking for areas of improvement, and we want to make this process as easy and as user-friendly for the LPAs as possible, because it's for you guys to get your projects funded. So we're going to be looking at, between now and the next funding round, we're going to be looking at the applications themselves and how do we need to provide more information with those as they are filled out by the LPAs, and how can we help applicants to get them the best chance to be funded by the committee or the director, depending on the category. And we have been working on the agreements as well. This is a brand new program, so the agreements were pretty brand new as well. So hopefully those will carry over for the next funding cycles, and it'll be just really easy next time. It's been a bit of a pain going back and forth with legal this time. And then the request for reimbursement phase hasn't started yet, so we'll, I'm sure, get lots of feedback and comments about that once it begins, once these projects get under construction. And then the outreach for the next round of funding is something we're going to work on as well, making sure that we work with our partners at the Township Association and League of Cities, LTAP, so that everyone who is eligible knows that this funding is available and knows that we are here to help with the application process. So we will take all suggestions under consideration for improvements for this process. And you can contact Tracy or myself if you have any questions or comments. And as part of this ongoing process, we're evaluating priorities between the various types of LPAs, because obviously the types of projects that a township needs versus a county versus a tribe versus a city, it can vary quite a bit. So we are going to be looking at how do we balance that? How do we make sure all those voices are heard in the selection process? Now, we've been getting lots of frequently asked questions throughout this whole process. Big one is, are these state or federal dollars? This is a state-funded program. So you can use these dollars like any local funded project you would have at your local level. Unless you pair it with federal funds, then you need to follow the federal guidelines, but otherwise you need to follow any state and local ordinances or century code. Make sure you're following the law on all these, obviously. You don't need to follow the state specs, you just need to follow whatever local specs you would use on any sort of local project. The bidding requirements are kind of the same. You need to follow the century code, and that involves certain dollar amounts. If a project is X number of dollars, you need to advertise it for so long in the local paper, stuff like that. You could bid it through the state if you really wanted to. We haven't been seeing a lot of that yet. And then as far as cost being eligible for reimbursement, any preliminary engineering services done since the award letters were sent out will be eligible. Those are sent out on April 5th of this year. So anything between now or between April 5th and the first request for reimbursement is eligible to be reimbursed by this program. And then once for construction costs, as part of the agreement that we're going to be sending out, we will need to concur with all bids for construction services. So once the agreements are signed and the bids come in and we concur with the amounts that the projects will cost, those costs will be eligible for reimbursement on an ongoing basis. Basically, however, if you want to do a monthly or however long. So pretty much just follow the terms of the contract. Once those are met, then all those eligible costs are to be eligible for reimbursement.
We've had a few other questions submitted there's been a question about when applications will open for the next round. We don't have an exact date yet for that, but this is a program that runs every biennium. So that means there won't be applications in 2024, but we will have them open up in 2025. Based on what we've learned from this first round, we more than likely will have those applications open up much earlier in the year than we did the first round. And we also anticipate having them close prior to the end of the year. That way we can hopefully have committee members meet, review, select projects, and get agreements out prior to the construction season starting the following year. We've also been asked if engineering is required for all projects. It is not required, but again, you need to follow century code. So if you're installing a new culvert or sizing a culvert, that needs to be done with a hydraulic study, and then those dollar amounts that's stated in century code with any local project for when an engineer is needed for the design of it. And then the final question we had submitted was, are projects awarded preliminary engineering eligible to apply in the future? So some of the projects selected only had their preliminary engineering portion selected, and so they will be eligible to apply in the future. So that, and then we are hoping they'll have a priority. We intend to have a priority given to them for funding in the future. It won't be guaranteed that their construction costs are covered, but they will, again, receive priority for that funding in the future.
Thanks, Tracy, Ben, Kent. I messaged in the chat that the chat is open for questioning now. So please submit your questions there, and we'll try to go through these, I guess, in order that I see them here, and I'll read them out so everybody can hear, and then we'll let our local government team try to answer them the best we can. So the first question then is, for townships, can this be used along with the Township Assistance Program grants for road projects? And the answer is yes, it can be, as long as the application was submitted that way, right? Like, so if the if you were awarded an application, awarded a flex fund project, this program can be tied or used in conjunction with other funding opportunities, and specifically with the Township Assistance Program, if those two projects were married up.
Yeah, just to jump in and add, so the Township Assistance Program was one-time funding. We don't know if the legislature is going to do something similar in the future. So, but yeah, if you were awarded Township Assistance funds in the last one, and then when you applied for flex funds and were selected, you could theoretically you could combine those programs. There's nothing excluding that, but yeah, we don't know if there's going to be more township assistance funds.
Yeah, that was the one-time shot. Question about clarifying future application timelines. We are working to get a better handle on that. The Flex Fund program is a biannual thing, so it accumulates every 2 years. We're trying to fit those timelines in better so that we can have something closer to the beginning of a construction season. This one took a little bit longer than we were hoping for, so we're behind the 8 ball a little bit on getting out early in the construction season. So hopefully that's something we can address into the future as well. And then we do have to work within the bounds of what legislature wants us to do with it too. So that's kind of I guess that's how I want to clarify the future application timeline. Because it'll be earlier, but we're not exactly sure yet when, if that helps. Yeah. Can you give examples of what would be considered an innovative project? Tracy, when we were looking at applications, can you put you on the spot and give some examples of innovations?
I think it's open to a lot of different things. Are you using new materials or new processes in your project? Also, are you thinking of like creative ways to solve the problem, or are you just using what you would typically always do? Something that I think was brought up quite a bit was committee members realizing that some roads got paved years ago and counties or townships or whoever have a trouble maintaining it. And so instead of just dumping more money into doing overlays or whatever, is it a better use of funds to potentially turn that back to gravel? And even though that's not, mind-blowing newness or anything like that, it is still like, instead of just continuing to maintain, let's think about what is best for that area actually, and the best use of dollars, not only these flex fund dollars, but future budgets for the LPA.
Yep. Thanks, Tracy. Yeah, like she said, innovative construction methods, innovative construction materials, different partnerships could be considered innovative, like funding sources, and who are your stakeholders, and can we leverage any other money? And that could be all considered innovative.
Yeah, and I guess there's another question about we think the scoring criteria will change in future rounds, and that's something we wanted to get input on. Was it clear when you were applying or filling out the applications what we were driving at? Are there other things people think make more sense as how we select projects? So I'd say yes, there's a good chance the scoring criteria will change for the next round. I don't know how much, and that's kind of why one of the reasons we're doing this is to get a sense of how clear it was to people that filled out the applications, and beyond that, like what are some other things that that locals are seeing out there that think we should be considering that maybe we missed, because we're unsure what, if we're focusing on the right things. So there's a question about is right-of-way going to be eligible in future rounds? So right-of-way was eligible in the current round of funding if you indicated on your application that right-of-way expenses were part of the estimate and your project was selected. Those are eligible costs. If when you submitted your application you didn't indicate that right-of-way was included, then right-of-way is not an eligible cost as part of the program. So that's because the funds are state funds, and we can spend them on essentially any part of the project that's required to get the project done. So the engineering, the utility relocations, right-of-way acquisition, the actual construction, all of that stuff. If that's something people want to see continue, that's if right-of-way is something, the cost of acquiring right-of-way is a hurdle for agencies, that would be good feedback to get.
Prairie dog funds be used as a local match. Yeah, that is considered that prairie dog funds are considered the locals' money, so that could be used as a match.
Correct. Yep.
The next question on the list here was a project that was rated platinum in this round, and that was when Tracy was talking about our preliminary scoring. They were put into 4 different groups, and that was presented to the committee and the director, depending on which program we were in. I'm not sure which project that is, but is there a reason why it didn't get selected, or will the rating receive this round in future rounds? I guess I wish I knew which project that was specifically, and we could talk about that. And that might be a good question to reach out directly to Ben and Tracy on, and we can do some more digging into those specifics. But then moving forward, we're not exactly sure how we're going to, if we are going to carry project that didn't get selected this round into next round, with the application and the ranking process. I guess that's still to be determined on how that whole process will work out.
Yeah, because potentially with the way the scores are calculated, you know, what doesn't make sense for the applications to carry over. But obviously, we don't want to make it burdensome for people
Right.
that you've already put the work in to submit the application. So we're thinking about how we can do that. So it may be a case where if you wanna, since you've already supplied all the information, we may be just reaching out to look for some other things next time around. I don't know, Tracy, if you had something to add to that.
Yeah, just those ratings were done based on the preliminary score. So then after that, it was up to the committee or the director to use those priorities to adjust those things. So again, please reach out to Ben and I, and we can look specifically at your case, but those were just supplied based on that very preliminary scoring within the project selection process.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good clarification. Is the preliminary scores were just there to aid the committee and the director and those two entities, depending on if it was set aside partner allocations. That's who made the decision. That's how it was designed. We didn't want the DOT, especially on the set aside, the DOT to make those decisions. That's why we had the committee of 7 or 8 different agencies to try to take in the priorities of each individual agency and how they would view these applications.
And those could change in the future if the legislature decides to change, or we decide to change what that scoring criteria is, or what those scoring areas are.
Yep, and that's the following question. I don't know if you're reading that, Tracy, but yeah, the weight for each decision factor in future rounds, I guess we will work within the limits of the rules set for us, the guardrails that legislator put on it, and then get that publicized. And I think we can do a better job next time of explaining what the criteria is and what we want out of the applications to meet that criteria. So yeah, we'll be reaching out a lot more and using the Flex Fund website to keep everything updated. Yeah.
The next one talks about if a project has been awarded a federal grant, like through the DOT, would you anticipate the applicant would need to apply for reimbursement for contractor payments, or so basically, if you're using the flex funds in combination with federal aid, we would handle that on our end. So it would be all done under a contract. Like one federal aid contract, we would have an agreement with the LPA that laid out the funding splits, and then when bills come in through us, we would apply the federal funds, we'd apply the flex funds, and then we would, if there was additional local match, that would just be get billed back to the local agency. So hopefully that answers that. That would be how we would anticipate that happening. The next question talking about prairie dog funds. If let's say you're planning to use prairie dog funds for the local match portion of the project, and for whatever reasons those buckets don't fill and they don't get dispersed, we don't have to spend the flex dollars within a certain timeline. So we have flexibility. If say you wanted to push a project out a year in construction, we could work with you to do that for sure. Yeah. The funds don't expire. So that's definitely an option. It would just be, you know, if when you tell us when you think if you think it's going to go in 2025 and then plans change, just let us know and we can move stuff around.
Yep, definitely. The intent of the program is to get projects done as quickly as possible. We realize there are extenuating circumstances, and we'll work with you on those case-by-case situations like that. The question about did most of the projects have a local match? Most of them did. I don't have the numbers. I think we can find that, Ben and Tracy, and see what you saw for an average and use that for information for future applications.
Mm-hmm. And then, yeah, like for the next question, yes, this is being recorded. So if anybody for some reason wasn't able to get on, it'll be recorded and we'll post the link out on the Flex Fund website. So dot.nd.gov/flexfund. And I think we can email it out to everybody that was in attendance too. So.
Did what questions did we miss? What else do you guys need to know, or what suggestions maybe be something I'd be interested to hear what suggestions you guys have for this program now and in the future. I see a question about project that greatly enhanced economic development. Would that be a consideration? And yeah, that was one of the core criteria, especially in the preliminary scoring that was then submitted to the committee for consideration and the director for consideration. So yeah, that was a big player, and the applications, the committees looked at those at that piece of the application for sure.
Yeah, and that's another reason we wanted to have kind of not just DOT on the committee, is to get, we had someone from the Department of Commerce, someone from the Chamber of Commerce, right? Is that?
Yeah,
and to get Greater Chamber, yeah. To get that perspective of we're can often be transportation only focused, and we wanted to see how these consider other things, as in one of those being economic development. So that was a factor. So the next question about payments. So basically what will happen is, this program's a reimbursement program. So the local agency will have you'll sign the contract with the contractor. You'll be responsible for paying the contractor, and then you'll submit the request for reimbursement to the DOT. When that comes in, we'll reimburse you the flex fund amount. So if, let's say the project is 80-20, 80% federal or 80% flexible transportation fund, 20% local match. If you submit a bill for $1,000 for construction that comes into us, we would send a check back for $800 so then that you'd be essentially, you wouldn't be getting reimbursed the local match. And then all the projects that have a local match, the amount the local agency would have to pay is capped based on what you committed to in the estimate. So let's say if a project came in over, you're going to pay the local match percentage up to the amount in the estimate, and then anything over that would be covered with flex funds. Because that is, we understand how difficult it can be, even if you have, if the project comes in way over, but your share increases a lot, and it's not budgeted for. We don't want projects to not be able to be funded that way. So that the local match that was included in the application would be the most you would have to participate in.
Yep, like Ken said, we recognize that the local agencies are limited, and we should be able to help with covering some of those overages, but that's where we need to concur with the bid award, so that there is there's some knowledge from the DOT of how much this project is going to cost, and that bid award concurrence, we would look at the scope and the cost, and then that'll kind of set the sites for the agreement to be, for the actual reimbursements.
The next comment about a survey sent out with specific questions. That's a good idea. I think that's definitely something we can look at doing. I think we'll look into that, because obviously, yeah, I get, it's kind of hard to come up with questions on the spot when it's open-ended. But if you think of something, after today, reach out to us, or if you have specific thoughts or want to talk, not in this forum, we could do that. But I think, yeah, we can look into potentially sending out a survey to see, kind of collect some more information that way.
I
The
think that
next
ties
question,
into the last comment too, Ken, about the interpretation of the supports complete streets
yeah,
and getting the feedback from you guys on what you thought it meant versus what Tracy had just explained, I think is a big concern. And we do plan to have whatever criteria we choose for the next round. I think we will definitely improve the descriptions of what that means and what that means specifically to the applications.
yeah. And then I want to add something to that, but the proof of payment, no, we are not going to require like a cancel check or something like that. We will reimburse based on invoices. So, but we would need the invoice as a supporting document. And so we'll, like Ben had mentioned, we'll be sending out like the example request for reimbursement. It'll be, a title page with a summary table. And then, you'll have to attach the supporting documents and summarize basically how much you're asking for, all of that stuff. But we will reimburse based on contractor or consultant invoices. And getting back to what Brandon was talking about with the question, and maybe it's a question we asked in the survey too. Like we have thrown around, would people like to see different categories you could apply for? Like if this one, the only split that happened was between the set aside and the partner allocation. So if you were eligible for the set aside, your application went in that bucket. If you were not eligible for the set aside, you went in the partner application, then all those were scored against each other. I mean, does it make sense to split those applications by like city, county, township, tribal nation, that sort of thing, or by work type? Or those are the sort of questions that I think we're going to try to think about. Is that something we should be doing? Or would that be easier for you if you knew you were competing against other cities? Or if you knew, there was a targeted funding amount? Like those are the sort of things we're looking to see. The reason we kept it as broad as we did this time is because we wanted to see, what type of projects were out there, what the need was. We obviously know there's a tremendous need, but we didn't want to limit, the type of projects you could apply for. Obviously, we did that to some extent by how they were categorized or by how we scored them, but would that make it easier when you're filling out an application if there was, different categories you could apply for? Or did you like that, like that the funding wasn't capped and you were competing against everyone? Like those are the sort of things we're trying to figure out.
Yeah, this has been good. These questions are great and good for us to hear this feedback. And even when you ask the question, that means something wasn't as clear. But we, as a DOT, should look to improve that. So I know one just popped up here again, but these questions are great. I'm sure there's more out there.
Yeah.
Please, we got the time now. We can try to answer them on this meeting, and you see the emails and the phone numbers on the screen here too. And we can get more answers there.
Yeah, and as to the 18 mills, so that was a requirement in the legislative bill, right? That to be eligible
Yep.
for the set aside, a township in a non-oil producing county had to levy at least 18 mills. Well, the maximum, unless you go to 36, but 18 mills in order to be eligible for the set aside. Otherwise, if you were not, then you got pushed over to the partner allocation, and just none of those township projects that got moved over did well enough to be funded. So we didn't fund any township projects for any townships that didn't levy 18 mills through the flexible transportation program. That is because the legislative intent, and for us to change that would require the legislature to change that requirement, at least for the set aside portion. We learned a lot about how mills are levied, and how, some townships get adjusted down below that by their county auditors because their budget, they got to levy what their budget is. Those are all conversations we're aware of, and we've been talking to the Township Officers Association about that. But because that's a requirement in the bill, we didn't have any flexibility there on the set aside portion. So. So the way we tried to give the townships, for the next question about could this requirement be modified to provide proof of implementation? Basically, we said, you know, the application window opened last fall, and then applications were due at the end of the year. And we said if you had 18 mills on January 1 of 2024, then you know, we just it was that was how we determined that. I don't know if there'd be a way for us to say, you know, if you're willing to change it. But that's definitely something we're talking about, how that impacts townships and how that all works.
Yeah, what other questions are out there? Anything else on the reimbursements or when projects can
So-
get started?
So for the question about did we award all the money? So for the set aside, yes, we awarded the 43 million. The partner allocation, there was no, like that amount there was determined by our director. If projects come in over, we have some flexibility because like obviously there's the pot of money that the state is using, and then, you know, because this is an ongoing program, if projects are overrunning, money from next biennium potentially could be used to fund projects that were approved this biennium. Okay, I think I said that right.
Yep.
So the only, I guess, risk of losing funding would be as if the legislature decided not to fund the program in the future, which we obviously would have no control over, but that.
Yeah, and I think it's become apparent to all of us here at the DOT that the program was put in place, and I think we did a good job of getting this thing out on short order. And then as we've worked through a lot of these problems, we've kept a running list of things that we know we need to address going forward. We've tried to touch on some of the high points here. But yeah, that's kind of how we wanted to evolve, and the feedback that we're getting from you guys is definitely driving a lot of that evolution.
Next question is about the contracts. Will these between DOT and the counties or DOT county township? So all of the township projects that were approved. So we've reached out to each township, or if we haven't, we will be reaching out to find out if the township is going to be taking the lead, like essentially you're going to be hiring the engineering firm if you need one, hiring the contractor, all of that. Or if the county is going to be doing that on behalf of the township. So the contracts are slightly different as far as responsibilities. Every agreement that's with the township will be signed by the DOT, the county, and the township. Because all of the payments have to go through the township. So no matter whether you're taking the lead or not, the request for reimbursement to the DOT will go from the township to the county, from the county to the DOT. We'll reimburse the county, and then the county will reimburse the township. Did that answer that question?
We will be sending out some more guidance on how the reimbursement, I think that was mentioned earlier in the presentation. Ben is going to send out some emails and lay out what we need for those reimbursement requests. So that we
Um,
can keep our ducks in a row.
yes, yep, sorry, Brandon.
No, go ahead, that was it.
Yeah. Is there flexibility in the scope of work under the total funding amount? Scope of work is kind of how we are going to limit these projects. So in this case, let's say you had applied for an overlay, asphalt overlay project, and you get out there and start doing the design work, and you need to do sliver grading. That's going to be a local cost, the way the contract is written. If it's out of scope work, we're not able to fund that. We may be able to, if it's within, like, we have some flexibility, but that's one of the ways we're, since we're not limiting cost, it's not you're getting X dollars where we approve scopes of work. We're going to be kind of limiting based on the scope that's supplied. But if it's something where, we're open to discussions on that though, right?
Yes, case by case.
Yeah. So the short answer is no. We're limited to the scope of work. The slightly longer answer is let us know and we can see if there's a way we can figure something out. I believe we set up a single project number and we'll have a separate agreement for each project that was awarded. So if there was multiple projects within one township, they'll get an agreement for each project. Each one will have a separate project number. And
Yep.
You could do construction. You could handle the contracts as one, as long as you split out the costs when you submit it to us.
Yeah, we needed to have them separate for our bookkeeping though. While Kent is reading that next question, I did want to add the estimates that were put into the scopes of work in the applications. We recognize that a lot of them were back napkin type of estimates. So we are trying to consider ways to get better estimates for future rounds of funding. Is everything there's a lot of work that needs to be put into an estimate to get it as accurate as possible, and we need to address getting more accurate estimates for sure.
Yep. I guess for the next question, what happens if the scope is reduced from what was applied for? So are you saying like the project, like you decided to change the scope of the project? Could you clarify what you're asking there, Gabe? And if you want, if you raise your hand, we could turn your mic on if that's easier too.
I see it's up, Gabe. I'm looking for the button. All right, if you unmute yourself, Gabe, I think you should be able to talk.
Can you hear me okay?
I got you.
Yep.
Wonderful. Yeah, so I mean, when we did the application for any of the projects, we were awarded one and not awarded a couple other ones. They're definitely a higher level concepts, and even at those projects, we had ideas of what we were pursuing as alternatives, but maybe hadn't made a decision on the alternatives, whether or not we did a trail connection crossing over to parkland or brought it to a certain length or connected a concrete road for an asphalt road. We haven't decided those things yet at the time the application was turned in, and we're now in the process of deciding some of those things as we continue with the project. So just how to understand if we modify scope either more than or less than what was written in that application of what we're undertaking, how that affects what the award status, just making sure we're clear on those consequences.
I think Kent's earlier answer still kind of does apply. The short answer is application scope. The longer answer is we can work with you. If your scope is reduced, it's still on the concurrence of the contract award or the bid award too. So that would set that limit or that number. But yeah, we fully understand that the estimates were done way in advance, and we'll have to work through that.
And just, I guess, kind of for everyone's information, the larger cities that were awarded funds, basically like a lot of those applications came in, they were looking for like 20% flex funds for where there was other funding sources for the vast majority of the project. The decision was made that that amount, that the amount of flex funds in that case is going to be capped. So I think in your case, Gabe, for the City of Bismarck project, the total amount of flex funds available is going to be capped at 2 million. So it may be less of a discussion since the city is covering the majority of the project. And the decision was made for the large cities to do that just because they have generally a greater ability to generate local revenue to pay for stuff. So
Yeah. I'm sure there are more questions out there. Does anyone else want to put them in the chat? We can all hear them, see them, talk about them. Yeah. Well, a couple of you are finishing up your last minute questions here to type in the chat. I'll reiterate again. Ben and Tracy, more than willing to help you. Future applications, questions about this round, reimbursements or contracts, agreements, they're here to help. And that's what we have them for here in our Flexbook program. The recording will be made available on the FlexFund website as soon as we can get it posted. There's some more FAQs out on that FlexFund website as well. You know, I'm sure you've all seen the interactive map of the selected projects. You can kind of see what everybody was doing. And then we will definitely get more guidance out going forward with the next round for sure. I think we can do a lot better now that we know stuff that we know after the fact. Question: what would happen if the real estate taxes were to go away as proposed and no mill levies?
I think a lot of things would happen. Yeah. I think the mill levy requirement would certainly go away, but I think there'd be a lot of impacts beyond that.
Yeah, that's going to have far-reaching impacts for a lot of different things. But I don't know the answer to that specific question, but I do know that it would affect a lot of stuff. Well, seems like things have slowed down here at the top of the hour. Oh, Dana's got one. The county is managing the township project. Are we allowed to bill for hours used for design, permitting, project management, and construction inspections?
Yeah, I mean, we would consider that engineering charges. Yeah, so I think that would be an eligible expense. We would just need you to submit, man hours with your rate, and then same thing if the county, let's say you were doing the work, we can, it doesn't have to be done by a contractor. If the local agency is doing the work, we can reimburse based on time, equipment, and material for a force account like that. So, yeah, I think if you've agreed to, if you're going to be doing the engineering for the township, I think that's something we could reimburse you for.
Yeah. I'll wrap it up. If anybody wants to get a quick question in before I finish my final goodbye speech, go for it. But again, there we go. Now we're getting more. For grant applications, we normally don't get out into the weeds out on details, especially survey and design. So some flexibility in the file scope is definitely appreciated. I appreciate that comment. That's good.
Yeah, that's definitely something sorry, Brandon, we've discussed, like how detailed of an estimate are you going to put together, how much time and effort, and which in the end is how much money are you going to commit to this estimate. We totally get that. So, and that's why we're going to be as flexible as we can. And that's one of the big reasons why we aren't putting hard limits on the majority of these projects, because when we do that, like, we know it ends up putting a burden on the local agency. So
Yeah, to come up with that difference.
that's definitely, yeah, if you have a good idea of how we can do better that way, we're looking for help on that one, if you know anything.
Yep. And on the flip side of that, from the state's point of view, we do have a limited pot of dollars. So we have to be able to put some sort of limit on it. That's where we're working with you on the scope and concurring with those bids so that we can gauge where the money needs to come from. But yeah, the comments have been made several times that the estimates were early in the process, and a lot of them were best guesses at best, right? And that's the world we lived in. We had to deal with that. Yeah, again, I appreciate the time, and we wanted to get something out there to everybody who was interested in the Flex Fund program on some things that we went through to get to this point. Definitely the next steps and where we're going, and try to talk about the application process a little bit. And if you have more questions, feel free to reach out to Ben and Tracy. They'll get back to you with good answers. Might not like them, but they'll be good answers. I don't have anything else. I appreciate the time, and we can get back to our days.